did you choose American? You had multiple choices in terms of schools, obviously good grades, and you decided to come to Washington, D.C. Tell me that story.
Yeah, so I ended up applying to 13 schools actually, and like one day, it was in January, and I said like, where do I really want to study? Like, do I want to be in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey? And that's when I really had like that moment of like, I actually really do want to be in DC. And I actually looked up like, I've heard of American, but not too much. And I did my research, and I said, let's give it a shot.
What was your second choice?
Vassar College.
Vassar, okay. And decided not to go to Vassar. Did you have a third one?
Yes. So it was, well, Seton Hall, because it's fairly close to my hometown.
Short drive.
Yeah,
near your
short drive,
folks.
yeah.
But I know from going to law school, American's a private school can be very expensive.
Yes.
And did that sort of factor in?
Yes. So actually, the night before I found out I won the scholarship, I received a phone call, and the person on the line was like, you chose American, but why not Vassar? And they gave me like so many reasons why to choose Vassar.
Seven Sisters.
Yeah.
Amazing reputation.
Yeah.
Right.
And they said like on paper, like Vassar seems like the better choice, and it was cheaper and it's closer to home. But I knew that my heart was like, no, I have to go to American.
Vassar's not an all-girls school anymore.
No, it's not.
Okay, so, and then you find out that you won this scholarship for which something like 24,000 people all over the country have competed for. You win the national prize, and you're involved even in the National Honor Society at your school, and they kept it from you until the big reveal.
Yeah, they did.
How did that happen?
So I mean, it was a surprise ceremony, so I knew absolutely nothing. Like, even my mother knew, and she usually tells me everything, so like, it was shocking that she kept it a secret for so long. So it was a surprise ceremony. I was told that, NHS is having a meeting, and I said, okay, well, I'm vice president. I should probably dress a little bit nicer, like be prepared for anything. And like I said, like the night before was pretty rough because I was deciding between American and Vassar. So it was not a nice night. And then the next morning, obviously, it wasn't a nice morning either. So I go to school, I have like my Vans on, I just put on my school pants, like a normal day. They called us down to the meeting, and then they roll out a cake that says, congratulations. And I'm like, what, who, why, right? And
for what?
For what? And then I see so many people walk in their suits and ties and nice dresses. I'm like, okay, this is serious. Like this, something actually is happening. And then we walk in and they tell me like, sit right here. And I didn't think twice. I was like, sure, okay. And then Miss Lee comes up to the podium. She starts explaining like the history of NHS. And then she gets into the scholarship. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is about the big scholarship. Like it has to be about the big scholarship.
And you're like, who could have got that?
Yeah, so when she said that, all my friends, because I was sitting in the like very back, so all my friends like turn around and they look at me, they're like, Jenny, it's you. And I'm like, no, it's not me, it can't be me, right? And so she actually says my name, and so I'm like, oh, like this is actually happening. Wow. So I go up to the podium, I turn around, and my mom, my sister, and my uncle's girlfriend who's visiting, they come up, and my mom's already crying, and I don't even know why, and I'm like, and that's when it hit me, like, oh, this is serious. Like, this is an actual, like, real moment that I need to, like, cherish. Yeah.
And so you've been here a month.
Yes.
At American University, and your major is?
Political science.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
I know. Why would you do that?
Well, from a very young age, I knew that, like, I wanted a career in service. Because, like, before I was like, I'm going to be a teacher, I'm going to be a lawyer, because, like, service was always, like, drawn to me, like I want to do service. And then with everything going on, in like our political world, I just saw that like I could have a voice, and like I have the ability to have a voice and serve the public, literally like a public servant to like the nation. And that for me like was it, and it drew me towards politics, and I've been like a political freak since then. So I knew that like if I wanted to study that, I got to come to DC.
American's a good school for that. Yeah. Great political consulting, teaching there. Any advice for her, Senator, your approach?
Well, first of all, I'm just blown away by her and her accomplishments already at this age. It's really extraordinary, not only to be in the National Honor Society, but to be a leader in your school and then to win such a competitive scholarship. is just extraordinary.
Thank you.
And so I'm really excited. I'm going to forgive you for not picking a New Jersey school. But obviously American is internationally renowned for its classes. And I'm just really proud. This is what life is about. And
You went to some extraordinary schools.
yeah, but she got in because of her grades.
Right. You were in the National Honor Society,
It
right?
wasn't National Honor Society, but I got my scholarship because of her 4.0, 1600, 4.0 yards per carry, 1600 receiving
Right,
yards.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
I was a high school American
amazing.
football
That's
player,
right.
yeah. So we got in. We took very different pathways.
Okay, but you are not being generous to yourself. You went to Stanford, you went to Yale Law School, and you picked up the prize that all of us seek, is that year at Oxford.
Yeah, a couple years at Oxford.
Yeah,
yes.
a couple years. So here's the thing. If you talk sort of dollars and cents in education, capital's right over there where you work. We know in this country that the cost of education is a problem. And it's a problem for people like Jenny. It was a problem for people like me. I chose my school based on an athletic scholarship rather than the Ivy League school that
Right.
so many of my friends were trying to go to. Is that a problem that's going to be solved by legislation? Or is it something the private sector is going to have to chip in on? How do we fix the cost of education so people like Jenny don't have to choose between the school that costs right and the school she really wants to go to?
Well, let me put a little more context on it, how bad it really is, because we were the best education nation on the planet Earth at a time that our middle class was expanding, at a time that our economy was doing well for everyone. And we did everything we could as a society to lower the cost of education. So tuitions hadn't exploded, but we were providing Pell Grants that made for the majority of the cost of school. Now Pell Grants barely cover a very small fraction of it. We did things like the GI Bill, and we were, in my father's generation, the #1 educating planet on earth. We had more college graduates per population than any other country. Other countries saw, wait a minute, we're going into a global knowledge-based society. The most valuable natural resource we have is not oil, gas, or coal, but the genius of our young people. And other countries said, let's out-educate what America used to do. And so they're lowering the cost of college. Germany, between 0 and 4% of median income go to college. Canada, 6 to 7% of median income. You can go around our global competitors who've lowered the bar. America, 52% of median income to go to college. College debt now outstrips every other type of debt, whether it's your car debt, credit card debt. We're saddling a whole generation. And as a result of that, there are less opportunities. And so we have to come up as a country. Every investor in this nation knows that you've got to invest some money in order to get a return. Dollars invested in a young person like this, her genius, her productivity, what she'll go on is extraordinary. But we don't see that cost-benefit analysis. And so you're right. We've got to change things here in Washington.
Now, the principals are here, and it's their convention right now. One of the things that they're going around Capitol Hill talking to people about is the teacher shortage. This is a huge problem, and especially with an audience like this, National Honor Society. At the end of the day, does it just have to do with increasing teacher salaries, or what? How do we get people, the good people, to teach?
Right, and so this gets back to the same issue of the cost of college. You have a lot of people coming out of college that want to teach, but they look at the college debt that they have, and they can't afford to teach. I talked to teachers and principals this week who were down visiting in Washington. Can't even live in the towns where they're teaching in the public schools because of how they can't afford to live where they live. So we need to massively increase teacher salaries.
Title I schools.
Title I
Right.
schools, exactly. So we need to
Jenny, just to mention, you were in a Title I
Yes.
school, is that correct? So tends to be a tough environment, right?
Tough, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Senator. I'm just
Yeah, so we need to increase, we know the data speaks for itself. You increase salary school, you're going to draw more people into the profession. We needed to do more to incentivize teachers to go into Title I schools, do better loan forgiveness programs to incentivize them, give them better tax breaks. We give carried interest to hedge fund millionaires, making them pay much less taxes, percentage of their money than their secretaries, but yet we don't give any kind of real substantive tax breaks to teachers who go in their own pockets to pull money out for whether it's bulletin boards, whether it's food or clothing sometimes they're paying for. And so the system, where we spend our money reflects our priorities. And we as a country are not showing the value we have for education, because when it looks to our competitors, they are out investing us in education all across the board. You see other countries who pull from the top graduates of their colleges into the teaching profession. We're just not doing that anymore. And the last thing I'll say is, we're so strange with our priorities that those people that do have to take out loans in this country, we actually use their loans, our students, as a profit-making center for the federal government. We make billions of dollars off of the student loan program. Think about that. We are profiting off the backs of kids, making money off of them and their student loans, as opposed to reinvesting those dollars to make it cheaper for people to go to college.
All right, I'm going to turn the corner just a little bit and talk to you about community service. I want you to hear about the blankets. I don't know how many of you all have heard this story, but a little bit about the other half of the National Honor Society, and not just the academic part, not just the GPA, but the other things that come into play as you're a member, an active member of the organization, as you were in your school.
Yes. So we did a lot of, so service is one of the pillars, is one of the pillars of NHS. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. And at least for us in our school, what we did is we partnered with Project Linus, and we made homemade blankets. So we bought like the material, and we would sit there and cut up the sides, make designs. We would sell the adult blankets to our teachers, our families, and then use that money to, one, pay off our, we had to pay our, what is it called?
Cost of materials for the blanket?
No, so like to become to apply for the NHS scholarship, you need to pay like a membership fee.
Membership fee.
Yeah. So we used part of that as to pay for a membership because we had no funds. And the other part was to buy material for the children blankets and then make those and then give those to kids in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
So that was, yeah.
And by the way, Jenny just came back from Ecuador, which is where your family's
Yeah.
from. And this was another community service project, but it involved your church.
Yeah,
Tell
so
me.
I've been a part of my youth group for about 6 years now, and it's a really, small community in Orange, New Jersey. We have a really small community, and with my youth group, I was one of the ones who organized this mission trip to Ecuador. So it was me, my two really close friends, and then a brother, and we organized a mission trip to Ecuador where we served the community. So our main goal was serving the community there. They have. And it was a small town called Bibian in Ecuador, and right next to Azogues, which is where my family's from. So I also got to see my family. And so like nights we would just meet up at someone's, like a family's house, and they would invite the whole neighborhood, and we would just play games with them and like really connect with the whole community there, or have mass. And the whole community would come, and then like we had a visiting priest with us who helped a lot of the families. A new face helped them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, Senator, you know I can't let you get out of here without talking some politics.
Okay, well, I've got my attaché here.
Yeah, I have a feeling
Yes.
you guys will probably see each other again at somewhere down the road, because going to a school that does stuff like political communications and consultancy, that might come in handy with you one of these days, I would suspect. Anyway, so interesting week, huh?
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to sort of set the stage, we've had the ongoing Supreme Court issues with the judge, and we've also had Bill Cosby being sent to prison, and there's kind of a theme that runs through this, and it's about the changing face of male-female relationships, of what is right and what is wrong, especially when you're young, and how that will follow you. I have a 15-year-old son who just went to high school this month. We started last week talking about the judge and the Supreme Court nomination, and yesterday we talked about Bill Cosby. What do we say to our kids about this debate that's going on in the country right now? How do we explain to them something more than, boys, keep your hand to yourself?
So let's separate this for a second. Before this first allegation, there was a debate about very substantive issues around the Supreme Court. Lots of my questioning were about voting rights when I was on the Judiciary Committee, substantive issues of policy, a woman's right to make her own medical decisions, access to health care. That was a debate. But this is not a time where I don't see anything changing. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I'm sorry, it was wrong then.
You wrote an article. You wrote an article in the
when-
Stanford newspaper.
Because when I was about your age, I was serving on a crisis hotline in my college, and I think I started my freshman, sophomore year, so I was ending my teenage years, and was stunned on a college campus. The numbers of women, calls we would get on weekends, weekend after weekend after weekend. And there was no blur about what was right or wrong. These were women that were being assaulted, being raped, being attacked. This is not a change in the moral compass of this country. It was wrong in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. This is not boys will be boys or locker room talk. We live in a country with rampant sexual assault and sexual violence. And the majority of women, between 70, 80% estimates are, don't come forward. And many of those women, and men by the way, there's been a lot of men that's reached out to my office telling their stories of sexual assault and sexual abuse when they were young. And yet, to this week, what we've seen is a nation watching, with millions of survivors watching, what happens when women come forward. Now, Dr. Ford has had death threats, had to move her family out of her home, is in fear for her life. One of her requests she made to our committee was when she gets here to please allow her to have security. This is a moral moment for our country and how we will deal with survivors who are coming forward to tell their story. And the fact that the Senate has not evolved in its processes on how to deal with credible allegations of assault is unfortunate. Because here we are looking back at the Anita Hill hearings. I talked to Anita Hill this week. And that was 3 days of hearings, multiple panels, and still the general consensus, right and left, was that it wasn't handled well. Well, here we have 3 credible...
27 years ago.
27 years later, we have 3 credible accusers. We have a president that refuses to dispatch the FBI to do a thorough background check. That kind of due diligence should be basic. We have...
So should this hearing be tomorrow?
No, it should not. We should... Every senator...
You're opposed to him. You're opposed to
yeah,
this
but I was opposed to him before these allegations. There's a bigger issue at case here right now, even beyond just a Supreme Court nominee. Is how will the United States of America's highest, most deliberative body deal with credible accusations of sexual assault? Will we rush a survivor into the United States Senate for a hearing that is not a full consideration of facts, of witnesses, no investigation done? Will we literally listen to women, or are we going to rush this through to try to get it to the Senate floor as quickly as possible to push somebody to the highest court in the land for a lifetime appointment?
What I did want to get to you, just because I've read in some newspapers that, this has followed you around because you wrote an article in 1984, or about 1984, of an incident when you were something like 15 years old with a girl. And you described it as a groping incident, a mutual groping incident, I think. At any rate, I think the takeaway, and I would like for you to describe your own takeaway from that article, was that your feelings about sexual misconduct involving men had evolved. But could you just sort of describe what was going through your mind when you wrote that article, and, if you could, the reaction to it then versus the reaction to it now?
Well, it's been pretty much consistent, the reaction to it. It's not the first time that people have looked back to my career. I've run for office.
Yeah, this has been, people pull it
there
out
for
all
years.
the time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I'm very proud of the article, and I hope people will take time to read the whole thing. I was a campus, let's go back to that time I wrote the article. I was a campus leader, college football player, president of my class, on my way to Oxford University on a Rhodes Scholarship. And I was so appalled by the rape culture. I was so appalled by the toxic masculinity that I thought from my position as a campus leader, knowing what I know about what goes beyond, because remember, it's an anonymous hotline that I led eventually from just being a counselor to eventually leading that organization, and seeing what was happening behind the scenes at my own campus. But more than that, being a guy, as I wrote very, very graphic descriptions of things I had heard said about women when guys were together, and how appalling it was, and how I felt an obligation to speak up to address that toxic culture. And so you take that time from the time I was a college campus leader working on a crisis hotline, all the way through to my time as mayor. The level of domestic violence in this country, the murders we have on a regular basis of women, the beatings, the assaults, not to mention what goes on in workplaces. This was to me, as a young man, saying enough is enough. I've now listened to women over a hotline talking about the lifetime consequences of early sexual assaults. And I decided I'm going to write a provocative article talking about, first, I'm not going to preach down at everybody. I'm going to talk about the messages that were sent to me as a young teenage boy and how toxic this culture is that supports an environment where not only women are getting, and again, women and men, I keep wanting to say that, are being assaulted at levels that are unconscionable, but we have a culture that protects the men that do it, and degrades the women and creates environments to make it fearful to even come forward and tell your truth. And that, I wrote that article in 1991, and here I am now as a United States Senator watching what's going on in Washington, and I wonder how much has really changed. That we right now are rushing to a hearing where we won't even give enough credibility to the survivor to do the basic investigation that the president could order right away with the FBI, the basic investigation, to listen to her. Now, not only the basic investigation, but we've scheduled a vote on this on Friday, and allegations have just come out yesterday from a woman who got security clearance.
Do you believe that's credible? Because I'm trying not to keep going on this topic, but do you believe it's credible enough that it ought to be investigated?
There is not only credibility in the last allegation, but now it presents a fact pattern.
But remember, the allegation here is just that he was present, not that he did anything, at least so far, as I understand.
Again, everybody should read that 2-page sworn affidavit, make your own conclusions. Is there enough here to say, wait a minute, let's pause this, let's do the proper investigations. And by the way, Jeff Flake, my colleague and my friend, was right to go on the Senate floor. These are 2 human beings, now 3 women and this judge, who all deserve for us to get to the truth of the matter asserted, because both of their lives, or all of their lives, are being turned upside down as they're being used by some for political fodder, for others to reflect a vicious tribalism. Let's put a pause on this and do some due diligence and investigation before we rush forward with the hearing tomorrow.
This is my last political question, but if I didn't get you into these 2 areas, I'd be, drawn and quartered when I go back to work. Are you running?
Listen, I've been running all over Washington this week.
Are you running for president? Senator.
I've been running. Look, I am, we're 40 days away from the most important midterm of all of our lives, hands down. This is we have a president who has no checks and balances. And so my focus is on these 40 days. And my focus during these 40 days, by the way, is I'm up for re-election in 2020, so my focus is making sure I can get re-elected in New Jersey. After this election's over, I will take some time to make a final decision.
Does that mean that you're leaning in the direction of running for re-election?
That means I'm leaning towards doing everything I can to help every candidate I can and to prepare for.
But you're going all over the country because it looks like you're laying the groundwork.
Look, I was going all over the country for Secretary Clinton. I was going all over the country for Barack Obama. This is a pattern for me, but now I'm doing it with a sense of urgency I've never felt before. The most important elections. Everybody in America, Republican, Democrat, Independent, you should vote. As one of my friends says, vote the change you want to see in the world.
So Jenny, now one of the things we did not get you to weigh in on is, and this is, it's an issue all over the country. Vice President Biden, when he was vice president, made it one of the big issues that he dealt with. This issue of predatory behavior by young men in schools, sexual violence. Is that something that you guys had to deal with? Are you dealing with it? Are you feeling it in Orange, New Jersey? I think it's too early to ask about Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I think at least I can only speak with my community and my school, there is definitely a disconnect between what guys do and what, like, that's what guys do and like how girls are supposed to react to it. But I think times are changing and that we're now realizing like it's not acceptable. You know, like people or students like me are more able to realize what's going on and realize like this is not right. You know, and like in the generation of my parents like that, I feel like it's a completely different world now, as it should be, you know.
And I have a million more questions for you, but I think probably my biggest question is, I don't know that we put the finest point possible on this issue of the scholarship from this organization helping you to come here to America. So it essentially changed your choice.
Yes, it changed everything. So after I found out I won the scholarship, like once I could think clearly, you know, after all the emotions died down, like the first thing I thought was, wow, I can pay to go to American. And that to me was the sign that I was praying for, like, you know, give me a sign that like I'm meant to go to this school, you know, because I couldn't put my parents through that. I didn't want to put myself through that. And, but now knowing that I can pay for college and pay to go to American specifically, I was like, yes, sign me up, you know, and I didn't take out any loans and I don't have to take out any loans because of this scholarship.
That's amazing, because I definitely did. Okay, and the other story that I just love of yours, actually I love many of, there's a story that brought tears to my eyes when I heard it. This is about you, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, all climbing into a van and driving down from New Jersey for your first day. All right. Tell me about that.
So actually, before, you know, I said yes to American, we actually came down to DC. We all came down to visit American. So we all got to see the school. We all loved the school. And so when it came for the decision, they were like, yeah, like of course. And then, you know, our family minivan is not going to make it to DC and back. We just knew it from the start. So, you know, we had to like look around. We asked another uncle of mine, like, and his van is just a little slightly bigger. So, you know, we just climbed in there. My aunt was actually visiting from Ecuador. So we were like, perfect, we'll take her along. And the first thing we did when we got here wasn't even to go to American, it was to go to the museums.
Right.
Yeah, so we all went inside and
Aerospace.
yeah. And it was funny because my dad, like I underestimate them sometimes, you know, I'm trying to take them to the cool ones, like the dinosaurs, you know, the animals. We go through like the mineral section and I'm like, you know, we can just skip through it. You know, we'll come back another day. And he's like, no, wait. And we spent the most time there. And he's explaining to my aunt like this and that, and things that I didn't even know. And I'm like, they took this as like an educational opportunity for them. You know, like this city is not only just mine, it's theirs too. And it wasn't just like selfies with the Washington Monument. It was like really understanding the history of DC.
But the mineral section.
Yeah, and the mineral section.
That's fascinating.
It sounds like you have a rock solid dad.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. I am.
I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone.
I'm getting the CNN wrap. If I could ask you both just sort of an exit question here, and it's the question everybody's going to want to know if they look at video of this. What's your advice to kids out there who would like to get this scholarship, who would like to go all the way?
So definitely has to be that hard work pays off. Because like I've been working towards this moment like literally my entire life. And I had my parents as like my backbone, and like my mother has always told me like, you have to do good so you can get a beca and you can go to school, and beca means scholarship in Spanish. And so knowing that, I grew up knowing that like I have to go to college, but I can't pay for it, so I need to work even harder than most kids. And it paid off in the end. You know, I'm here like where I wanted to be. I'm studying what I want to study and hopefully becoming who I want to become. Right. So.
And Senator, you've gone all the way, obviously, and there are certainly people out there who are going to look at you and say you are a role model for what they'd like to be, especially if they're scholars. What's your advice?
Well, she embodies it. I mean, I'm so proud and so inspired by you. And I think that what she just said, something was told to me when I was very young. It's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than have an opportunity and not be prepared. And so she prepared herself, and more doors open. The harder you work, the more options and more opportunity you're going to get. And you were prepared for an opportunity, And because of that preparation, I think this incredible blessing came to you. And I want to just say to this incredible National Honor Society, what you're doing, especially the scholarship part, is extraordinary. You are planting seeds that will yield a harvest beyond our imagination with these young folks that you're getting scholarships to, what they are going to do in this world and how they're going to change it for the better and remake a more perfect union is just inspiring to me. So I'm grateful to be in your presence. You're from New Jersey, so just don't run against me until I finish with my position, okay?
The competition is
All right.
good. All right. Jenny, Senator Booker, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now.